There's a lot of things in this old world that just do not make sense. Like why there's so few believers on the firing line, while so many others sit the fence. But if you want to know where the Word of God stands, and believe it wants to use your feet and hands, it's time to take your faith out of the seats and into the streets, and come along with me. If you only look, then you will see on WCNTV.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us again on WCNTV. I'm Rob Pugh, your host, and I'm here to tell you the truth. I should probably clarify that a little bit. You see, unlike the mainstream media, I have nothing to gain by pushing propaganda and brainwashing on you. But these days, we also need to be on the lookout for the alternative media, because many times things that may sound true or that might advance our personal beliefs on a particular topic are not true either. Alt media these days seems to be steeped in a lot of what they call fear porn or clickbait. I can't tell you the number of emails that I get in my inbox every single day, with a huge headline that says things like breaking news, bombshell. They use that one a lot. This will finally send Fauci to prison. You know, that puppy thing might actually do that this time, because he can maim and kill as many people as he wants, but you don't dare mess with a puppy. Anyway, when you open up these emails after going through about 15 ads, you find out the story is nothing more than hyped up tidbits of old news or a flat out made up story with no facts or solid information at all. So fear porn and clickbait has become big business now too. But this show will never be like that. Like I said, I'm here to tell you the truth, and we've had some excellent guests on, America's top researchers and experts here on WCN-TV, and today is no exception. Today, I'm happy to welcome to our program our panel of two of our Wisconsin Christian News writers, our good friends Doug Hagman of the Hagman Report and Coach Dave Daubenmire of Pass the Salt Ministries. Welcome, guys. Welcome, Doug. I can see Doug. I can't see Dave, but
thanks for having me, Rob. Appreciate being here.
It's a privilege to have you. And our guest today is John Whitehead. John is a constitutional attorney and author, and he founded the Rutherford Institute in 1982. They're one of the nation's leading advocates of civil liberties and human rights, litigating in the courts and educating the public on a wide spectrum of issues affecting individual freedom in the U.S. and around the world. If you haven't seen him on national media, then you've probably been living under a rock somewhere. He also writes a weekly commentary distributed nationwide, and he's authored more than 30 books, including Battlefield America, The War on the American People, and A Government of Wolves, The Emerging American Police State. You can see him there on your screen. Today, we're going to be talking about something that should concern us all. You may think that the idea of concentration camps here in America is pretty far-fetched. American citizens being locked up in concentration camps, nothing more than a conspiracy theory, right? This has been going on, it's been in the news for quite a while now, and I think back to the days when Obama was in the White House and we had the Jade Helm exercises. Jade Helm was kind of a dry run for rounding up Americans and operating American internment camps. And the images and videos we saw back then were startling. They're basically showing us what they had in mind, what they planned to do. Now, in the middle of last year, the Center for Disease Creation published a document calling for what it calls the shielding approach to limit the interactions of high-risk and low-risk individuals under the COVID-19 hysteria. This document, which you can still find on the CDC website, states that the government will be voluntarily or involuntarily physically separating high-risk individuals from the general population. This is already happening in other countries. You just look at Australia or Canada. In Canada, they actually have internment camps in every province now. So this is not a conspiracy theory. In fact, according to the Canadian government, anyone who attempts to avoid detention in a government internment facility will face $1 million fine and 3 years in prison. Now, let me quote from the actual CDC statement here. It says high-risk individuals would be temporarily relocated to safe or green zones established at the household, neighborhood, camp, sector, or community level, depending on the context and setting. They would have minimal contact with family members and other low-risk residents. Their plan is to place these people in these green zone internment camps for at least 6 months, but their policy is open-ended, allowing for internment to continue indefinitely. The document also states they'll need to provide counseling and psychological support for those they round up, and that individuals will not be allowed to take part in social, cultural, or religious practices. And they recognize they need to prepare for resistance. Indeed, they do. In other words, these are not about anyone's health. They're specifically designed to be re-education centers. Paul Craig Roberts noted that the term high-risk individuals is defined as the unvaccinated. So you'll be able to stay out of the camps simply by getting the jab, just like everything else. Now, John Whitehead wrote an article on this back at the end of September, and I found it extremely interesting. Let me read just a few of the first sentences for you of that article, and then we'll bring him in. He wrote, "It's no longer a question of whether the government will lock up Americans for defying its mandates, but when. This is what we know. The government has the means, the muscle, and the motivation to detain individuals who resist its orders and do not comply with its mandates, and a vast array of prisons, detention centers, and FEMA concentration camps paid for with taxpayer dollars." Now, before I bring John in, does anybody besides me, have you picked up on this? Have you noted that Obama did jade helm, and now we're talking about green zones? You know, the color jade is also green, right? I'm just saying. All right, so I've said enough. Let's bring John in. Welcome to the show. John Whitehead, Rutherford Institute.
Thank you for having me on.
You know, I don't want to just speculate about all this or spread any more conspiracy theories. I want to know what you know, John. And of course, we all know that this is not the first time that this has happened in American history.
Well, I was a bit shocked in 2006 when the Bush administration announced that they were giving Kellogg Brown and Root, which is a subsidiary corporation of the Halliburton Corporation, $385 million to build detention facilities that would be administered by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And it was kind of interesting when I was reading about it because when government is, and again, we're dealing with a government that for many years has been out of control, whether you believe it or not. You're talking to someone who has been doing this for 40 years. And I've been visited by a number of former NSA agents and people like that who tell me it's worse than you think, John. And they're serious the things they tell me. But they set up, supposedly they were going to build these camps starting in 2006 for supposedly an influx of immigrants, which is something they use, or to support the rapid development of new programs. And when I saw that phrase, rapid development of new programs, that means anything they want to do. If there happens to be a major upheaval in the United States, a tremendous economic breakdown. So we at the Rutherford Institute called Halliburton, we called Department of Homeland Security, who was working with Halliburton, and asked them where the camps were built, when they were built. We could not get an answer. They kept referring us back to Halliburton, back to Department of Homeland Security. They would not answer the question. I had a former NSA agent, however, tell me that they have been built, and most of them are located on military bases. and they're ready for use whenever the government needs to use them. And I think that we have a government that I've written in my books, Battlefield America and the Government of Wolves, that's very paranoid about the American people. It's paranoid about anybody that in any way disagrees with the government. And they're ready to go. And this is another thing most people don't realize. This is all I do is research this. And this has not been announced. This was leaked. At Fort Benning, Georgia, they've built $1 million city now, a training center. It's like a little city with buildings and stuff.
Where is this? Where is this, John?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay.
Where the infantry trained. By the way, I trained there. I was an infantry officer way back about 40 some years ago. Where they said they're going to train for so-called domestic extremism or whatever. So supposedly police and the military are working together. And most people don't realize this, but dealing with, there are 80,000 SWAT team raids in America right now that occur annually, where police are going through doors in the middle of the night. Up to 500 dogs a day are killed. They shoot the dogs first. All kinds of disasters have happened, and I've written about them in my books, like Jose Carrera, the former veteran in Arizona. The police were doing a sweep of his neighborhood, doing SWAT team raids, trying to find marijuana. They broke down his door in the middle of the night. He grabbed his only weapon he had in his home. Former veteran, decorated veteran, grabbed his rifle, a hunting rifle, stood at the end of the hall. He put his child and his wife behind him. The police entered, saw him, shot over 70 times and killed him. Believe it or not, no marijuana was found in his home. The funny thing about all this, and you mentioned the mainstream media, they don't cover hardly any of this. You don't hear much of this about the mainstream media. They're busy always talking about the new fad thing, whether it goes from COVID to climate change or whatever they're doing right now. And as I've illustrated to people in my books, Carl Bernstein, who worked with Woodward and Bernstein to get all the information that finally led to Richard Nixon leaving the White House, journalist, in 1977, he wrote a very detailed argument. He was freaked. He said when he started working with the other newspapers like New York Times and the national media, TV, he found out it was the NSA and CIA sitting in their offices vetting and changing articles and editing them. He said it blew his mind. He said, this is not journalism. So for many, many years, the American people have been fed just a string, like a serpentine, going out and wrapping around you all this information they're feeding you. And what I'm telling people is you have to learn to think independently. You have to learn to do your own research. The average American watches 150 hours of television a month. If you're doing that, folks, you are blind. Your mind's not going to think at all. If you're not thinking. And I'm telling people, turn off. I don't watch the mainstream news or any of that stuff. I do my own research on the side. I read books. I go on the internet and read articles by respectable journalists and stuff and get my information that way, research their footnotes. And what I say is, people say, well, I want to see some change in America. Well, education precedes action. So I'm telling people to get educated. But the point is that they are ready. There was a 2030 video, again, on something else that was leaked, that the Pentagon put out several years ago, where they're predicting. You can go to our website at rutherford.org, and take a look at it. But it's predicting that by 2030, at least, this country's going to break down and martial law is going to be implemented. And let me tell you something, they're ready to do it. In my opinion, in most United States, they can lock down the country within 24 hours. Most people are going to go along with it, by the way, in America, if you have the right reason, depending on.
Well, I think there are plenty of reasons they can pick from. They can take their pick of reasons right now.
Oh, yeah.
Especially give it another month or two when the supply chain really gets tight. Supplies start running short, and people are going to line up to walk into those FEMA camps and get their food rations.
Exactly.
For one thing.
But here's the other thing, as I note in my books. When it happened in Nazi Germany, I mean, the people in the towns where the camps were located, they were happy to have the people in the camps because they worked, produced products and stuff like that. But we have a private prison system that does the same thing today. most people don't realize that the United States, the land of the free, has the largest prison population in the world. Where all these private prisons now are making women are actually in the field picking fruit and vegetables for companies like Walmart, making products for Microsoft, and they're making a lot of money off. It's one of the biggest industries in the United States. So we're in a very strange situation. But here's the thing: if I would say a citizenry that actually thinks, in the true sense of the word, would be outraged by this, they would already be in the streets. And that's one thing that I've been trying to do for years, is stand on the cliff and yell, "Hey, here it is, folks. Wake up. They're coming. They're here." And they're already here. And I can tell you more stories of some of our cases, but it's a very difficult situation in the fact that your masses of people out there are not listening right now. They're up into the COVID, whatever you want to call it. The next thing, they're starting to push the climate change thing now. They're shifting the stories. And that's how the mainstream media stays in business, shifting the stories so they can keep you watching while they feed you information and ads, and they want your money. And that's basically it. They want control and they want your money.
Let's bring Doug in here. I'm sure Doug has some questions that he'd like to present. Put you on the spot. Yeah, Doug, gotta unmute yourself.
Hey, sorry about that. Counselor, thank you very much for that. You know, watching what happened after Hurricane Katrina, and of course after 1/6, the redefinition of domestic terrorism, all of this, and Merrick Garland's statement about domestic terrorists being just an incredible threat at this point. My question to you, and also one more thing about the patriots that were incarcerated and still incarcerated in Washington, D.C. under deplorable conditions because of their actions on 1/6 or their protests. How is all of this connected with defunding the police initiatives? Well, let me redirect that question. Is part of this an attempt to federalize the police forces? Is everything that we're seeing here an attempt to federalize the police forces beyond what we've seen? Is this what's going on?
Or internationalize the police forces?
Yes, that too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think so. When I've worked with a lot of good police officers, some of police chiefs who have sat down with me, others who have actually spent some time with me as we consulted, have told me that the FBI is doing most of the training of the police chiefs now, and at different bases in the United States. And the FBI actually has, like in the large cities, they sit in the offices of the police departments or work with them. And if you followed anything that the FBI has done since its inception, it's a pretty scary organization in the sense that they watch everything. They're even going after our DNA now. Under their CODIS system, they have over 50 million examples of American DNA. And the Supreme Court, by the way, has put up with that. When you're pulled over today, they can grab a DNA sample and they got you. And by the way, 2 Russian scientists have come forward and said, watch out for the DNA. It can be faked. They can make you a criminal. They can actually fake your DNA at a crime scene, the government can, and then arrest you and put you in jail. So we're in that kind of territory right now. And what I'm seeing is, especially when we saw some of the riots with Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, with all these National Guardsmen coming in and working with the local police, I thought, gee, that's the military. But if you look at some of the average policemen in the big cities, let's say New York City, when I've traveled there, I see the policemen standing on the street corner in black outfits, Kel-Bar helmets, bulletproof vests, and huge AK-47 rifles. And I'm going, wait a minute here, protect and serve, or should we be afraid? And when you try to talk to them, they basically push you away. So there's a whole different mentality. When I was a young man, to give you an example, I lived in Illinois in a small town. The next door neighbor was the police chief. One day I asked him, he never carried a weapon. I said, Scotty, I was in high school. How come you never carry a gun? He goes, I don't want to shoot anybody, John. And he walked off. You don't see that today. You just don't see it, and you don't hear it. There's this idea that they can come to your door and do knock and talks now and bang on your door. This is all militarized stuff. And people are getting shot in the middle of the night. And red flag gun laws going after your guns. I mean, the Second Amendment says we have a right to have a gun. Why are they banging on the door in the middle of the night to get them? So it's we're seeing this happen all over the country, and people are scared to death of police. But should you be afraid of the police? If you're afraid of the police, you don't live in a free country. Who pays their salary? I keep telling people this. You pay their salary. You're the master. Take control. And so, yeah, I would say that very much so the police are being federalized, and internationalized is another example, too. The UN is working with this in different cities now. They have UN offices actually working with local authorities and the police. So what the elite want is basically a global environment, and with the internet, it's moving rapidly in that direction. Most people do not realize that the NSA, which is a nefarious group, by the way, has its Five Eyes program. They have bases all over the world. They're circling the globe now, and they work with Google, and Google works with China and Japan. United States is $30 trillion in debt. Who do they owe the money to? Does anybody know? China and Japan. We owe China, a company that rounds up people and putting them in detention camps. We're taking money from those kind of people. I mean, if I took the money from a mafia group, I'd be arrested in 2 seconds. We take money from a group that puts people in concentration camps like that, takes Christians away and locks them up. What are we doing in this country? And Google sits and works with them and all these groups. So we're in, I want to use the word hell of a mess. We're in a hell of a mess, and there is some hope, I think. I always see hope. I'm a Christian. I think there's hope in people who believe that they have inner freedom and they can reflect that inner freedom outside in society. But you can't do it by sitting inside, staring at a tube with talking heads and not doing anything. And that's how we're training young people. The other thing is I've really noticed is this is scary to me, being a constitutional lawyer. The average American, 73% of the population in a recent poll, cannot tell you how many amendments are in the Bill of Rights. 10, folks. Takes 462 words. They're the most important documents in the world. Here they are, folks. Read them. First Amendment, you have free speech. You have a right to protest. You have a right to own a weapon. Oh, the Fourth Amendment, what does it say? You can't do surveillance on American citizens unless you have a warrant or they're doing something wrong. Well, the NSA now downloads billions of our phone calls every day, all our emails. They're watching everything, and they're doing it with local police. And is anybody objecting? I mean, the kids in the public schools today do not know the Bill of Rights. They don't read the Declaration of Independence. So our country is going backwards. We're moving back in time to a time when oppression was the rule instead of time when freedom was the rule.
Well, we're definitely being watched, John. We've got, we've got Alexa. We don't, but people do. We've got these robotic vacuum cleaners that actually map out the floor plan of your house and upload it to the cloud. So we're being watched. I mean, we're doing it to ourselves.
Facial recognition cameras.
I don't know if people realize that.
Yeah, cameras are everywhere. Facial recognition software. The drones flying overhead, which most people don't see, can actually pick up your face 2 miles up in the air and track you. And Google's tracking everywhere you're going. So everybody's being tracked. I have some friends who said, well, I'm tired of this crap. I'm moving to the woods. And I said, well, if you take your laptop or your cell phone, no use moving to the wood, dude. Well, so you go to the FBI and said, they can turn your cell phone on from a distance. It becomes, to them, a microphone, and your laptop becomes a camera. They can watch you, at least to a certain degree. But you're right in our homes with Amazon key recognition devices on the front door. Those are fed directly to the local police, by the way. Amazon works with local police and feeding all who's coming to your door, who's leaving, etc. You know, if we lived in a country that actually believed in morality and truth, and we got out and spoke it to people on the streets, we got out and talked to people and gave them the knowledge that they need to have, we could be doing a lot of good things. But getting people to do anything today and getting them out of their homes, the lockdown, by the way, virtual education, all that stuff. I mean, we have basically semi-robots teaching our kids. We're really in a bad mix. We need humans. Digital people are not human. And that's one thing that I'm really nervous about, is keeping humanists in the human race. We need to stay human, folks. We need to care for one another, and that's the key. People ask me, why do you think you're on the planet here, Whitehead? Why are you here? I go, because I'm here to help others. That's why I do what I do. It makes no sense otherwise. I'm not here to watch TV. I'm not here to listen to my cell phone or blab all day or just sleep. I'm here to get out and do something to help this country, to help this society, and hopefully the world eventually.
Amen. John, tell us about this database that you wrote about since the 1980s. It's called Main Core. Tell us what you know about that.
It's a database used by the Army, the Pentagon, to being the FBI, FEMA, all the groups have access to it. It has up to 8 million names on it. It's called Main Core, and it's people who will be rounded up in times of distress. I honestly believe there's more than 8 million names in the database. But it's people who are dissidents, extremists, and an extremist today, as the Department of Homeland Security has basically come out and said, is someone who opposes the COVID mandates. You're an extremist. Conspiracy theory. If you disagree with the government, if you believe in the Bill of Rights and advocate the Bill of Rights, you're an extremist. And we've had cases with people who have been rounded up. You know, most people don't realize this. This is something that shocked me. When we handled a case for a young Marine who got rounded up, he was 26 years old, on his home on a Saturday morning in Virginia. He was typing, he heard some noise, he went to the front door and he saw the police coming up and people in black suits and black ties. They were the FBI, Department of Homeland Security. And the reason they came to his home, because this was when Obama was in office. He was attacking Obama, saying Obama should be arrested for treason. And he was definitely a conspiracy theorist. And they arrested him, took him to the police station. They even smashed him against the fence. He wasn't resisting. And he asked for a Band-Aid or a bandage put on his back. They put a prison shirt on. He said about killed him. He had a 5-minute conversation with a psychiatrist in a cell, a jail cell. And the psychiatrist said he had severe problems psychologically, mainly because he was a 9/11 truther. And he had a small hearing in front of a judge who didn't know what he was doing, and he was put in the mental hospital. It's called civil commitments. 1.5 million people a year disappear into mental hospitals based on civil commitments. Now, what saved him, his mother called us crying. ACLU, all the groups would not touch this case. They said, civil commitment, sorry, they backed off. I said, it sounds nuts. We got a law firm, we worked with them. In a week, we got him out. And the point is that they already have their detention camps in a certain sense of the word. And if you got 1.5 million people a year being rounded up and put in psychiatric wards for nefarious, so-called nefarious things like this guy, we already have the camps. They're there, they're operating, and they infuse them with drugs and stuff. I remember he called me from the psychiatric ward and said, John, they're trying to give me drugs, and I'm telling them I don't want them. And the psychiatrist was listening. And I said that you have to have a warrant and a judge approve this before they give you the drugs. And he doesn't have that. And we're going to sue him. And 2 days later, he got out of the clinker. But there's a lot of things going on in America. Like I say, the mainstream media is not telling you. That is frightening. Just think about that. For being an extremist on the web, you could actually get locked up and put away in a psychiatric ward.
Well, Nowadays, all you have to do is go to a school board meeting and be upset with a transgender straight. So
Just disagreeing with the government, you're an extremist. Yes.
yeah. So how many, John? How many these camps do you think there are? I located a map. Maybe we can put that up there for people to look at. This is what I found. Does that look accurate?
Probably so. Anywhere you have a military base located, and they're all over the country, yeah. And some of them, people have told me they've seen them. They're in isolated areas way out in the woods, some of them. So I would say yes, that's probably accurate. And it's just think about this for a second, though. What kind of people would do this, have a main corps, label you an extremist because you disagree with the government, and they live in America? What type of people? Are they insane? Well, there was a 2014 study done by Northwestern University and several other universities, by the way, where they studied where psychopaths congregated in America. After a detailed study, they came to the conclusion Washington, D.C. That's true. Washington, D.C. And they came to the conclusion, this is their quote, America is ruled by an oligarchic elite of 585 billionaires who, like I say, they want to keep their little mansions. They want to keep their money, their control, and they don't care about the average person. They're not there for that. They've, the root, what is the root of all evil? The love of money. And they're into money. And most people don't realize this during the COVID, all this COVID stuff, the top 12, 13 billionaires in this country increased their wealth by over $300 billion. They make money off of everything while we are begging for government handouts, all kinds of things. We don't have jobs, homelessness, going bananas in this country. You don't realize there are 5,000 federal laws in this country and 300,000 federal regulations? I mean, we help people all the time. I mean, groups that want to help feed the homeless, the police arrest them or put them out of business, saying you can't do that. This is America, you know. This is what we're here for, folks. But you know, fighting on all fronts. It's to the point now where people don't seem to care about one another anymore. When you have people fighting over toilet paper in a store, I mean, we've reached a point where some comedians of the past would be rolling on the floor laughing and going, it's surely a joke, right?
Yeah, you couldn't write this stuff. You really couldn't.
No.
Doug, what do you think?
Yeah, I've got a question about Maine Core and about the database of 8 million. John, what would that look like? I mean, I'm trying to work this out in my head where...
I'd like to see where I'm listed, Doug. I'd like to see what they've got on me.
Page like 1 or 2, but what would this look like? How would they be able to pull that off, especially with today where people are starting to rise up and say, you know what, this is bogus. You know, at school boards now we're seeing some pushback. What would the attempted incarceration or arrest and incarceration of some 8 million look like? How would that play out?
Well, I don't think they'd arrest 8 million at a time. What they do now is, and I've talked to some insiders that tell me this stuff, the local police now watch all the social media, and they're into pre-crime now, very much pre-crime. If you've seen the movie Minority Report, Philip K. Dick, the great writer, predicted all of this was coming about, pre-crime, as it's called. And they're trying to round up. I mean, in Washington, D.C., they arrested quite a few people not too long ago. But an MIT Harvard study showed that 94% of the people that were rounded up and they were charged with the possibly committing a serious crime or violent crime, 94% were found not guilty, but they were rounded up. And their name will forever be on that list of people in Maine Core. And it's not just Maine Core, by the way. The NSA has its own list. I mean, the NSA downloads 2 billion emails daily. They're watching everything you're doing. Google and Amazon, Facebook, and groups like that actually work with the 17 intelligence agencies and maintaining their intelligence cloud. I mean, all this information they have on everybody. Listen, there's a bubble surrounding us all, folks. Everybody listening to this, you have a file. You are a suspect. We live in a suspect society. They have a new technique now. It's a app that the police use called Shadow Dragon. And what it does is, what used to take 120 days collecting information takes like 2 hours now. It goes over the internet and downloads everything into a tremendous file. Your views, what you think, where you've been, what political rallies did you go to, what shows are you watching Mr. Rob Pugh today? You know, and that would put you on the list. So it doesn't take much. And this is, like I say, this has been going on for years. The FBI back in the 1950s, if most people don't remember their history, was rounding up people for just writing a letter to a newspaper saying, I disagree. They were labeled leftists. I mean, people like Ernest Hemingway, Frank Sinatra wrote one letter, and he was upset by something the government was doing, was put on the FBI watch list. Bunch of celebrities just because they spoke out. And these were fairly decent people. So again, listen, all the FBI statistics and reports show that America right now has one of the lowest crime rates ever. Now here's the question. Why in the world are they watching everything we're doing? Why? And who's doing it? And people, again, do your research. Google announced years ago their Singularity program to be complete by 2029, where the human mind is going to fuse with the internet, and they're going to be able to read it. Eric Schmidt said it, the head of Google. He said, I will know what you're thinking before you think it. And most people are going to be hooked right into the internet, and you're going to be fed all your information by artificial intelligence, our robotic creatures. In fact, one major person just left Google and said they're creating God. And he was freaked.
So this surveillance software is called Shadow Dragon. If anyone wants to research that further,
it's dangerous stuff. I mean, it's amazing what the police have now, watching everything you're doing, where you're moving. License plate readers downloading 600 license plate images an hour. The police drive by, and then they track you with drones, facial recognition. It all comes together. And listen, here's the key to being a human: privacy. We have very little privacy anymore. I mean, when I'm in my home, I tell, again, I don't have Amazon or anything because I would not have that in my home. I don't want anybody listening to what I'm saying. But I know the cell phone's listening. I know that once I've done this. This is what blew my mind not too long ago. I was talking about some subject matter. About 20 minutes later, I actually wanted to check my email, blah, 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 and there it was. There was some advertisements for what I was talking about.
Oh, that's happened to us numerous times.
It's itching you. But here's the thing. You have robots watching us now, robotic entities. And these robotic entities, they're not human. I mean, if they take you away to a concentration camp, they're not, the so-called entities are not going to object. The only thing you have is humans. And that's why I'm saying the biggest challenge we have right now is keeping humanness in the human race and keeping our privacy. And I think we could make some headway if people in their local communities would get together and take over those local governments and say, we've had enough. We're canceling those SWAT teams unless there's an exigent circumstance. And basically, you'd need that. We're getting rid of the facial recognition software on our street corners. We're getting rid of all that in our neighborhoods. They even have them in neighborhoods now. And pull back on this stuff. You could do it. But getting 10 people to even think like that is very, very difficult.
Well, until they have to. There's coming that day. Back you mentioned the police being militarily weaponized. A few years ago, when we lived in a smaller town, probably 18,000 people, our local police department got basically a tank. It was an armored vehicle, heavily weaponized tank.
Yes,
what do we need this for in a town this size? when the cops do nothing but write speeding tickets and parking tickets. But we got our tank, and that was right during Jade Helm. So
They, local communities now have MRAPs. They have all the Kelvar helmets. They have sniper rifles. They have Stingrays. The police have a Stingray device that fits in their car. It's a little box. They drive up in front of your house, sit for a few minutes, download everything on your computer and your cell phone, and drive off.
Wow.
They have all this information right now. And I've written about it. It's in the books that you flash on the screen, Gun of Wolves and Battlefield America. I would, if I was a mayor of a town, I would pull the police in and say, get rid of that right now. Don't you be pulling them in front of anybody's house. Why? What does the Fourth Amendment say? The Fourth Amendment says the government should not be watching you during surveillance unless they have evidence of a crime or a warrant from a judge saying, who's looked at the situation and that they can do it. When you have watching your social media accounts and tracking you and stuff like that, listen, you're talking to someone that does this all the time. I'm out there. When I go to some meeting and police are there sometimes, the police look at me when they meet me and say, this is John Whitehead. They kind of step back and go, okay. And they say he's against it. I'm not against the police. I'm against unconstitutional activity. And most people don't realize it's unconstitutional activity. And that's what's going to keep, the only thing that's going to keep us free is knowing those Bill of Rights. And again, I give away a pocket constitution for any amount of donation. Keep this thing. And they do work, by the way. We had a fellow that called me and said, John, it works, your Bill of Rights card. I said, oh, it is. What'd you do? He was on a street corner, I think in New York City. I think that's where he was at. Had a picket sign. He was down with something. 2 cops showed up, got out of their car and walked toward him and said, what are you doing out here, man? He said, I'm exercising my First Amendment rights. They said, what? And he read them the First Amendment and they went, okay. They got in their car and drove off. They don't know it. They don't know.
I used to have the Bill of Rights on a little business card size piece of metal. And it was metal, and it was made specifically for you to put in your pocket and take through the TSA screeners, so that when they objected to you having your piece of metal in your pocket, you could say, here you go, I'm handing you my civil rights.
Yeah.
Take them.
But
just to make them think. But I never had the guts to actually go through with that, but I did have that little metal Bill of Rights.
We've helped quite a few military veterans, by the way, and I'm really concerned about them. With this Operation Vigilant Eagle, if you haven't heard of it, let me tell you about it. It's a program run by the Department of Homeland Security and the Pentagon. They watch all returning veterans now. They track wherever they go, what they do. I've had one I actually knew who did an email. It was 3 sentences, by the way. I asked him why I saw some helicopters in our local community, and I said, hey, what are they doing? He wrote back and said, oh, they're conducting exercises in the hills that simulates Afghanistan. The next day, 2 FBI agents showed up at his door with their guns and told him that if he did any more emails like that, they would deport him and take him out of the United States. He came into my office crying. But this happens to a lot of people. They don't know to come see me, because I write a letter and basically a legal letter and say, back off or we're going to sue you. Once they are outed, they back off and go away. But most people do not realize you have that. And the thing is that, again, a guy who went to the Air Force Academy, a pilot, a real decorated pilot, over and over again, came into my office, and he was being tracked by the government and watched. And I said, what'd you do? And he said, well, when he left the government, he said, I cannot serve in the military anymore. He said he went by some fields in Afghanistan. They were opium fields. He said they were being guarded by American troops. He went to his command and started screaming about it. They moved him out of the military, that he couldn't fly anymore. So we're in a situation right now where people who have the problems that we see should be coming out, should be talking about it, should be getting involved in their local governments and making a difference in other people's lives. And that's what we need. And like I said, you can sit in your home, hide and all that, but that's not going to do you any good. If you studied Nazi Germany, that didn't do anybody any good. When they got ready to get you, they came to the door and knocked and took you away. And we're facing that. I'd say we have 5 to 10 years of maybe minimal freedom left in this country. the way things are moving and the way the government's talking with Google and all this stuff they're talking about, and artificial intelligence, the militarized police, the lack of respect for the citizens of America. I mean, and I think most Americans are going to go to sleep. I mean, we're in the Matrix. All those films that were made that gave us warnings, we're there already. And the question is, can we make a difference? Yes, we have a little time left to breathe.
John, do you think the FEMA declaration that they made, or CDC last year, about putting this all into action over the vaccines, do you think that's going to actually materialize?
If again, if it gets to the point where they can get the American public to support it, yeah, and they're going to need a crisis. The present government we have right now lives off a crisis.
They're using COVID as the means to an end. So
certain areas, I think they could probably pull it off for a while anyway, until people like me started screaming and lawsuits were filed. And but any local community that would allow that, shame on them. And that's why programs like this are important. I hope the people listening to this program will go back into their communities tomorrow and start working, because the federal government is not going to listen to you. Again, the federal government, the so-called deep state, is run by people who won't care about one thing: money, power, and control. And they lie to you.
Well, it's already happening in Canada, just across the border. So we had. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah,
and I think one more thing. One reason it hadn't happened here is because Americans they're seeing the uprising. And what I tell them is, as long as you get down to those meetings and you stay peaceful, once you get violent, that gives them the excuse to get violent and blast you away and say these people are crazy. But some of the actions I'm seeing right now are stalling it. And that's what I keep saying. Get together in groups, school board meetings, city council meetings, picketing, and show these people that we're not going to put up with it, folks. We're going to back you down.
Exactly. And my question to you, and I thought of this, just so people know. I mean, John's books are great. I was referencing, or I was reading Government of Wolves when I got this invitation to come on. But let me ask you, what is the objective behind the Capitol Police being sent into different states? I mean, and how is that even constitutional? But primarily, what's the objective there? That we saw Nancy Pelosi, Congress say, yeah, okay, go ahead. Capitol Police going to Florida, Capitol Police going to California. What's that about? And is that even it's not constitutional? I don't think. I'm not an attorney, but it doesn't seem that way.
You raised it earlier. They're wanting to nationalize the police. They don't want local police. They want a web of police, so that wherever you go, you can be grabbed immediately, and so you can be tracked. That's why the license plate readers, the Stingray devices, the NSA working with the local police, Google and all that stuff, giving them all these apps that they can track wherever you go. So they want to know wherever you go, they want to be able to watch you and grab you at that point. And at this point in time, they have the power to do that, in my opinion, initially, unless there's people like the Rutherford Institute. And we're one of the few groups out there that actually will fight some of this stuff. That's it. But they do want a national police. They do not want local police. They do not want local governments. No. And
is this part of the defund the police program?
I think it was a threat. The defund the police was a threat to police to say either move in with us or get out. We're coming. We have the power. It was a threat, I think. And I saw with the National Guard and some of these military groups working with local police. When I see that, I wrote a commentary last year objecting to that, saying, don't be doing that. We need local police. And what it blows my mind sometimes when I've done research on local police in some of the bigger cities, and like Baltimore, 70% of the so-called local police don't even live in the city, and like 50% live out of state. The key to local police is they should be in that community. You should be able to be their neighbor. They should know you. And that's already dissolving in the big cities. They're not local police anymore. And they work with the FBI and all those groups. So we've already moved out of that in most of the big cities in America.
If I can throw one more question in, if you don't mind, to
Yeah.
what extent we see police enforcing these government mandates, specifically mask mandates or things like that, which again, constitutionally, it just doesn't appear to be constitutional. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Is that just about compliance? Is this a test about compliance for the mask mandates and the vax passports and such? Or I mean, is there more to that, or is it just face value? Hey, the government or the state government said to do this, the federal government said to do this, so we're just enforcing the wishes of the people in charge. It blows my mind that we're even talking about this, but what's behind that?
The so-called pharmaceutical government we're under right now. Again, 585 billionaires run the government. Most of them are connected to the pharmaceutical industry now, and they make a lot of money. They made a lot of money off of this COVID-19 issue, and that's a large part of it is money. They want money and control, and they're running the government basically. That's why you saw a lot of this, I think. I mean, it's amazing how much money the pharmaceutical companies have made, and with the vaccines and the increase in vaccines, again, there's been a lot of objections to what are in vaccines and stuff like that. I'm no scientist. I don't know. But the point is that in the future, they're going to have vaccines, I think, for every kind of disease you can name. Diseases where we used to be able, you go to a doctor and say, take a cold pill or take this pill. They're going to be shooting you full of vaccines. And that's the way it's headed for the future, I think. Kids today have already been indoctrinated into it totally. And compliance is one thing, obviously, yeah, but indoctrination into in government we trust, not in God we trust. And that's another thing I'm telling people. The guy who wrote our Bill of Rights, which no one reads anymore, James Madison, said, we ought to mistrust all those in power. Why did he say that? Because people in power regularly get out of hand. All it takes is a compliment to some people, and they get giddy and change. I've seen it happen, by the way. I've stood in and out of Washington, D.C. for 40 years, and it's like one of the most corrupt places I've ever seen. Here's another thing, folks, that people don't realize. All across the United States, they have underground facilities now. If you want to read about one that we've written about called Mount Weather. The government has underground facilities where all their executives will go. One is Mount Weather. It has malls, shopping centers, food exchanges, and office of the presidency. They're located around the country. So in times of emergency, if something really happens, let's say they think that the American public's going to go bananas, they're going to go underground, or there's a war or whatever. But listen to this. Think about this for a second. We, the taxpayer, are paying for that. They don't build them for us. We'll get blasted. We'll get killed, or whatever's going to happen. They'll be hiding underground and watching through their cameras.
Well, I actually got to see one, John, because when we were in Missouri, against my wife's better judgment, I drove us a few miles out of our way and hunted one of those facilities down, and that we actually drove into it as far as we could before I chickened out and turned around and got out of there. But yeah, those things are massive and they are real.
They're real, but they're for the elite. They're not for us. We the people.
Yeah, we did not feel at home there. So
no, they're not for you. When I was in Washington, D.C. many years ago, talking to a congressman who I respected, he says, I want to show you something, John. Are you ready for a treat? And I went, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but yeah, show me. We took us to these elevators with guards, and we went in the elevator and we went down. When he opened it, it was underneath the Capitol building. I walked out and wow, tracks were moving. Little, what do you call it, buses moving, and people walking about with bags. And I went, what is this? He says, this is our facility. And I went, I didn't know you had this kind of thing here. And he goes, they're all over the place, John. And we up and out I went. But I actually saw, and I was going, I'm paying for this, but they'll leave me to high and dry because they don't care about me. But see, that's how they view the American people. And it's unfortunate, but listen, we have an inner freedom. Again, I keep saying that. Let's express it. Let's get out there, talk about the Bill of Rights. Let's get down to your school board and say, hey, how come you're not teaching the Bill of Rights in our school anymore? Why not you reading the Declaration of Independence? Well, the preamble of the Declaration of Independence says, hey, we want to, we're going to take the government and toss it away. People like Thomas, why are they taking down statues of Thomas Jefferson in New York City now? Read what he had to say. I can kick butt. I don't like government when I get ready. I'll kick butt. He was asked one way, he was asked once, what was the best way to take a walk, Mr. Jefferson? He says, with your rifle. These are the kind of people they don't want anymore. They don't want you reading their philosophy. They weren't perfect, folks, no. And again, and I'll say this, if you go the wrong way, if you do what John F. Kennedy said, I'm going to take the CIA and tear it up and toss it to the winds. A few months later, he was dead. Martin Luther King was going to shut Washington, D.C. down nonviolently. He was shot with a hollow point bullet in his head, just like Kennedy. But here's the key, and people don't realize this. The Department of Homeland Security bought 1.6 million hollow point bullets about 8 years ago for all their federal agents. When I was in the military, an Army officer, I could not use hollow point bullets. They were considered cruel and inhuman. Because on contact, they expand and blow your arm off. Or if you've seen the Kennedy assassination, his head went off in the back. That's the kind of government we're dealing with. They'll give hollow point bullets to their agents, 175,000 of them, by the way, roaming the country. And I'm not supposed to have them. What's the deal?
Well, folks, we have been talking about the FEMA camps around the country. Before we go, John, I just want to let you know, last week we were able to obtain a health department order for quarantine. So here's something to consider. Why do we need FEMA camps when we can quarantine people in their own homes? But this is really drastic. This is a small, very rural county near us, mainly Mennonite and Amish people. But some of the things on this quarantine order, you must not leave your home at any time unless you have received prior written authorization from the CCHD to do so. In order to ensure that you strictly comply with a quarantine order, the CCHD or persons authorized will monitor you. If you prove to not comply with this order, a quarantine officer may be placed at your home until your quarantine order has ended. And if you fail to comply with this quarantine order, you may be ordered to be quarantined in a more restrictive facility. So there's more to this, but we got a hold of this document last week and talked about it on the show.
Oh, they're there.
So
they're ready to go. Yeah.
Here we have the local county health officers really acting as tyrants.
Using the local police to round you up. They're SWAT teams. If you disagree. And like I say, they have the MRAPs, which are those tanks on wheels. They've got all the equipment, folks. And I've had a few friends of mine say, we're getting our guns and getting ready. Well, I'm telling them, you better watch out. They'll blow you away in 2 seconds if you raise a gun toward them. They've been doing that all over the country. So wise, peaceful activity does work. Again, Martin Luther King was not perfect, but he was wise in how he approached the civil rights matter. And too wise in a sense, because like I say, his family believes they blew him away. And I agree with that, the way he was shot. And if you get too effective, watch out. That's what I'm saying. But if you really believe in what you're doing, keep doing it. And we can change things. We can change things on the local level. What's the 10th Amendment say? Local government can nullify acts of the federal government. Throw the federal government out of your communities and take charge, folks, of your freedoms.
Amen. John Rutherford, John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute. Sorry, I get you guys confused. Yeah, the Rutherford Institute. It's rutherford.org. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Doug.
Thanks,
Hey,
Doug.
Sorry, we didn't have time to get into our audience today, but we will next week, I'm sure. And next week, Dr. Mike Spalding will be with you, and he's got a fantastic guest and a fantastic topic next week that you will not want to miss. I'll be back in 3 weeks with my guest, Bill Federer from the American Minute. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.